Aloha guys, it's Joe Tunney and I'm visiting my very good friend Anthony Fagundes, the finance manager of BMW of Hawaii on the big island of Hawaii here in the beautiful city of Kona. And Anthony is just now taking delivery of his very own 2020 BMW X4 M Competition. And I want to compare the differences not only between the BMW X4 M and M Competition, but I want to compare it to the 2020 BMW X3 M and M Competition. And I also want to compare it a little bit against one of the great sports cars of all time, the Ferrari Enzo. And the reason I want to do that is that the Ferrari Enzo, one of the most incredible cars in the history of the automobile industry, perhaps the single greatest Ferrari of all time. It goes 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds. Well, guess what? This X4 and X3 M Competition, they go 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds. The Enzo Ferrari takes turns at 0.96 G-forces. The X4 and X3, 0.97. They actually take turns even sharper than the Enzo Ferrari. And they do it in a sport utility that can take your kids to soccer. You can load up from Costco. They have all-wheel drive. You can drive them in the snow. They come with a 4-year, 50,000-mile bumper-to-bumper warranty from BMW and get 17 miles per gallon real-world driving all around. And we're going to start by taking a look at the 2020 X4 M Competition. So, as we know, this goes 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds. Let's find out what that feels like. It feels pretty fantastic, but it does it in a way that's silky smooth. It's such an even rush of power that honestly it doesn't even feel like you're trying too hard to do too much. Also, one of the, I don't know about complaints, but one of the nuances that you'll hear mentioned in the competition package, particularly the X4, is that it communicates every bump in the road a little bit too much. Once again, that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, for just tooling around, you'd never even know this car was fast. It really drives that easy. So Anthony Fagundes, who owns the X4 M Comp, is widely considered to be one of the top finance officers in the entire Pacific. So much so that BMW just paid for an all-expense trip for him to go to where?
Croatia.
Africa.
Europe.
The other Africa. So this is the single most powerful 6-cylinder engine that BMW has ever put on the road. It is the S58 inline modular 6-cylinder, although it's very similar, just under 3 liters, to its other, what you would consider M40 sport type cars with single turbos. This is a twin turbo 6-cylinder engine with 90% of its parts being completely different than any other BMW 6-cylinder engine. So it's not just a hopped up version of something more widely seen in BMW's product line. It has things like an aluminum head, it has forged pistons, forged connecting rod. It also has twin turbos that put out 18.9 pounds of boost. So 18.9 pounds of boost. You're ramming so much air into that engine from the turbos. I liken it to, if you've ever seen the album cover for Judas Priest's album Ram It Down, you probably haven't because it's from a million years ago, but it just shows a fist just smashing the earth with all of its got, just ramming it down. And I think of the power that these turbos generate and just ram it into that engine. This engine puts out 503 horsepower and is only 2,993 cc's. So incredible horsepower per liter, incredible horsepower overall, and 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds in a family hauler. You've got to be kidding me. But comparing the X4M to the X3M, I want to take a step back and kind of showcase them side by side. Comparing the X4M and the X3M is a lot like comparing twin sisters. Sure, everybody thinks they look exactly the same, but if you get to know them, one of them's just a little bit sexier than the other one. And I'm going to give you a hint which one's the sexier between the X4 M Comp and the X3M, and it's this one right here. It's lower, it's wider, it's longer. So although mechanically they share the exact same DNA, the experience is very different in the X4 M Competition versus the X3M and X3M Competition. Let's take a look inside and see the difference there. Inside, it is very, very similar to what you might expect from other high-performance sports cars of today. It just sits higher so that it gives you a completely different perspective. It's not like you're on kind of the magic carpet ride of a low-slung sports car, which is pretty much every single thing in this horsepower class, or at least this performance capacity class. You're almost like royalty in your throne, and that perspective is very different for something that goes this fast. The only thing I can compare it to, it's almost like the difference between driving a NASCAR car and driving a Formula One car. Even though ultimately they may do the same times around the lap, your experience is completely different between the two. I personally enjoy the NASCAR experience over the Formula One experience, and I think for people who feel that way, they're going to enjoy cars like the X4 M Competition and X3 M Competition a lot more than most who might not. Most people who like that low slung, low to the ground kind of dynamic, this probably isn't their cup of tea. But for somebody like me who likes that taller, more visible experience, there's just nothing like it. Now, this is lower than the X3 M Competition. In fact, it's a couple of inches lower. It's lower, wider, and longer. Now, a lot of the worry is, well, if it's lower, wider, and longer, is it going to compromise my headroom? Well, I'm 6 feet tall, 180 pounds. I've got the seat pretty much all the way back, and I'm plenty comfortable in here. The other thing is speaking of plenty, there are plenty of adjustments to be had in the X4 M Competition as well as the X3 M Competition. Everything is adjustable, from the ferociousness of the shifts, or if you like a more subtle shift, you can actually control the way the ZF8HP automatic shifts. You can control the sound of the exhaust. You can control the damping of the suspension. You can control the steering input. You can control everything in this car. It is completely customizable in every single possible regard, so that not only is it an incredibly high performance vehicle, but it's high performance done in a way that's explicitly comfortable to your tastes. Let's jump in back and see what it feels like back there. So again, I've got the seat pretty much all the way back here, but still I'm pretty comfortable in the back. And so if you had two 6-footers in the back, you're fine. You're not just fine for a commute, you're actually fine for a pretty long drive. It does have theater style seating, and I'm always a big fan of that because most of the time engineers don't think about people sitting in the back, and so their experience is lightly regarded in most cars. Where this, I'm actually looking through the windshield as if I was sitting in the front seat. So I'm very comfortable, my visibility is very comfortable. Headroom, so what does everybody say? Oh, the headroom's so horrible in the X4, and why do they make something so sloped in the back? Nobody's gonna be comfortable back there. I'm like stretching out and keeping my back straight, and I'm still not touching the roof, and I'm 6 feet tall. I mean, how tall do you need the thing to be? And so, plenty of room in the back seat. What you read about the negative on that, it's not true. You actually have plenty of space back here. Let's take a look in the back. So, of course, Anthony, like a lot of really cool people here in Hawaii, likes to relax after work by going spearfishing. And so, but it's good to know he's got all of his spearfishing gear back in here, and you realize, you know what? There's a lot of trunk space in the back of this. Once again, one of the thoughts is that, well, because the X4 is a fastback design where the X3 is more upright, the X3 is going to be much more practical. Well, how much more practical do you need? This has got a gigantic trunk. This trunk's bigger than an S-Class Mercedes. And so you have gobs of room in the back. And you don't need more than this 99% of the time. So besides being a top finance manager, Anthony is also an accomplished chef, a sommelier, and a former martial arts champion. But let me ask you, Anthony, what's the real story? Somebody comes on the lot and they're just looking. Do you give them a little hi-ya? And they wake up the next day in the trunk of a 7 Series in their driveway?
Not for free.
The secret's out, folks. Now, one thing you're going to notice that's different about the competition package versus the standard X4M and X3M is that it sits 25 millimeters lower. And so I'm going to compare the difference between a competition package and then looking over here at a non-competition package. Also, the wheels on a non-competition package are 20-inch wheels. If we move back over to the competition package, it's 21-inch wheels. It's 4 piston calipers in the front, single piston calipers in the rear. The brakes on this are otherworldly fantastic. I'm going to give you an example. One of my favorite cars in the world is the Mustang GT with the performance package. That's the one with the front Brembo brakes, and it's the best for a real-world high-performance sports car as far as Ford Mustangs go. It goes from 70 miles an hour to 0 miles an hour in 157 feet. This is a sport utility, not a car. So no matter how good the brakes are, they're not going to go 70 to 0 in that fast a time, not in 157 feet. Believe it or not, these cars go from 70 to 0 in 146 feet. It's crazy how spectacular the brakes are in this car. So the X3M, because of its 2 inches of greater headroom, just has a more spacious feel. Now, a lot of people are going to like that extra spacious feel. For me, I like something a little bit more snug. I'm not 6'10", I'm only 6 feet tall, so I don't need such colossal amounts of headroom, so all this extra space is wasted on me. It's not a bad thing, it's just if I had a choice, I would want something that's a little bit more custom tailored. However, performance is identical because the vehicles are only 10 pounds different from one another. The X3 is just incrementally heavier than the X4. So dynamically, they perform about the same. 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds in either car, 0 to 100 in 8 seconds. That is absolutely astonishing. DNA exactly the same between the X3M and the X4M. DNA exactly the same between the X3M Competition and the X4M Competition. Let's take a look in back. So the legroom experience is the same between the two because they both have the same wheelbase, 112.8 inches. However, there is more headroom in the back of the X3 than there is in the X4. Again though, how much headroom do you need? I'm completely comfortable in the X4. I'm even more comfortable, honestly, in the X3. It's just all this extra space is kind of wasted on me. Let's look in the trunk. So there is a cubic foot advantage in the trunk of the X3 over the X4. But that little bit of stretch in the X4, overall, for real-world use, you're going to realize that the trunk space for real-world applications pretty much identical between the two. There's nothing you're going to be able to do in the X3M that you're not going to be able to do in the X4M.